Bruce Lee is one of the most influential martial arts actors in history, possibly the most. As a result, many fighting games honor his legacy with their own characters based on him, some obvious, others a bit more subtle, so I want to go over the fighting game characters that mimic Bruce Lee the best. The most obvious factor is they use some of his signature moves, like the flying kick or one-inch punch, or the fighting style as a whole, Jeet Kune Do. Other aspects to consider are their appearance, clothes, backstory, or even if they just do some of his signature high-pitched yells when doing their moves. You know, like the... Now, let's kick into action with the top 10 Bruce Lee clones in fighting games. Number 10, Li Long from Soul Calibur. With Soul Calibur being a weapon-based fighting game series and Bruce Lee's weapon of choice being the nunchaku, it was easy to make the nunchaku user of the series a Bruce Lee clone. Li Long premiered in the very first game before the series was even known as Soul Calibur, called Soul Edge or Soul Blade, and he pretty much has all the moves you'd see from Lee in his movies, with the swings around and the thrusts forward, and some of the foot-themed follow-ups like the step forward or the chest crush. Now, Li Long's appearance seems mostly original with a bit of Bruce Lee influence in the sideburns, but he at least has a lesser reference in his name. Bruce Lee's nickname was Li Zhao Long, meaning Li the Little Dragon, so Li Long just removes the Zhao to make it mean Li the Dragon, of no specific size. After his initial appearance in Soul Edge though, he never got much else to do since he was immediately replaced. In all following games, the character Maxi was the resident nunchaku user now, and he used Li Long's moveset as a basis for his evolving fighting style. Maxi is just more dynamic of a character in his appearance, backstory, and animation while fighting, but I still say it's no contest why Maxi is better because Li Long never got a chance to evolve himself. Li only later appeared on the roster of Soul Calibur 3 alongside Maxi, but still Maxi overshadows him so much. Li seems like a more serious character, while Maxi is a pirate Elvis guy who's having fun, so I could have predicted it trending in Maxi's favor if they did share screen time regardless. Despite not having any Bruce Lee references visually or in his name, Maxi still embodies the spirit of Lee in his attacks and how he yells during the fight. Maxi also has a special stance where he constantly has the nunchaku moving around to prepare for his next attack while being unable to block, which seems like a reference to when Bruce Lee would swing them around when idling against enemies ready to attack. This stance was also a button masher's nightmare back in the day, since if you accidentally activated it without having your follow-ups ready, you would just get punched in the face. So Maxi, he's so prolific of a nunchaku user in the series that he even took over for Li Long in his own segment.
Don't get in my way! Messing with me is just stupid.
Number 9, K-Dash from the King of Fighters. The King of Fighters doesn't seem to have a direct Bruce Lee clone, which is kinda surprising for how extensive their lifetime roster is. However, they do seem to split and scatter the Bruce Lee references among different characters in the series. Kim Kapwan and his cohorts do a Bruce Lee-esque Kia yell with their big hits or flurry of kicks, but they're Taekwondo practitioners, which is a different fighting style from Bruce Lee. Then there's Kenso in the King of Fighters 13 specifically, who has a Bruce Lee vibe with his one-off redesign, but still retains many of his old unique moves. And some people say in the Fatal Fury portion of the series, Han Fu is a Bruce Lee clone, since he fights with nunchaku, and Bruce Lee sometimes had a tank top on like that in his movies. But I've mainly viewed him as a Bruce Lee Jackie Chan hybrid homage, with the hairstyle, detective backstory, and lean in towards comedy being more the Jackie Chan side of his character. But that brings us to K-Dash, another character with plenty of traits that don't match the Bruce Lee vibe, but I think he has one of the most important aspects of it to his character, the fighting style. K-Dash's look is based on the character Cool from the video game The Fallen Angels, which is so obscure, K-Dash is beyond miles ahead of Cool in terms of cultural relevancy. And his backstory is also original, being the protagonist of an arc in the King of Fighters, where even his fighting style is called pure violence, since he was part of an experiment program program that gave him special powers related to the old protagonist, but erased his memory. Once again, not something typical of a Bruce Lee clone. However, despite the pure violence label of his fighting style, it's actually a modified version of Jeet Kune Do. It's very apparent in his kicks, with one of his under-the-radar iconic attacks, Minute Spike, being his own version of a flying kick, and it's versatile where you can activate it. Plus, he's got his own 1-inch punch mixed in there. It's also nice how he combines these moves with fire, like he just kicks the fire over at the opponent at some point, and he throws his sunglasses like a cool guy, which I don't think is Jeet Kune Do, that's just him being him. If you want a bit more Lee authenticity, some games let you color his black jacket yellow like Lee's Game of Death tracksuit, but overall, K-Dash is a very unique character that spices his personality up with a bit of Bruce Lee. Number 8. Chie in Persona 4 Arena. Chie is a major Bruce Lee fan. She based her moveset, noises, and I think even her hairstyle on him. She's very kick-based, of course getting a flying kick in there with a dragon theme, and during her attacks, she makes sure to get in the wacha and atata sound effects similar to Lee but with her own twist on it.
Take this! Satanaka-style double kick! Hiya! Ha-cha! I am a dragon!
And of course, she has some completely unique attacks, like I don't think Bruce Lee ever had a butt slam. Unlike most characters on this list, she's not an in-universe replacement for Bruce Lee, she's just a fan. Her interest goes so far that it actually affected her persona, Tomoe. A persona is the physical manifestation of the mind and spirit into something that can help you fight, so its body pattern copied Bruce Lee's Game of Death tracksuit. With him, he makes Chie's attacks more fantastical with how far she can fly now, and he has the God Fist, where she yells, "Fist of Fury!" when doing it, being another Bruce Lee reference. So overall, her love for Bruce Lee was the start, and Tomoe completed her as a full-on Bruce Lee reference in gaming. Number 7. Jan Lee from Dead or Alive. Jan Lee is another character who's a fan of Bruce Lee that based their fighting style on the actor, though he always had a few convenient coincidences in there, like his birthday is the same as Bruce Lee's, November 27th, and his name is a Bruce Lee reference, not just having Lee as the last name, but the Jan is a reference to Lee's birth name, Lee Jun-fan. But striking similarities aside, Jan Lee takes his Bruce Lee fandom to heart. While he has his own personality, being more arrogant and hot-headed, he's got the Jeet Kune Do moves down with the proper yells in the middle. You've got his quick punches in succession, flying kicks, the 1-inch wait, I could've sworn he had a 1-inch punch. What, do I have to look under the table? Where is it? Okay, so apparently they removed it in Dead or Alive 6. Why? When you have dozens of attacks, if you needed to remove something, why did you take out one of the most iconic attacks associated with the guy this character is based on? Surely one of these other attacks they kept could have been a version of the 1-inch punch instead. I'm almost positive it's gone, I've looked all over this game. Dead or Alive 6 had a lot of issues with their monetization on their downloadable content, so they did not need this to add fuel to the fire. But on the topic of costumes, Dead or Alive is known for having dozens of potentially overpriced costumes. So Jan has a wardrobe full of Bruce Lee movie attire, and possibly other stuff. I generally stick with the Kung Fu jacket, but I'm always a sucker for the Game of Death outfit. Though I can't really say I play Jan too much, but when I do, I love those highs into lows. Look at that pressure game. So all in all, Jan is a solid Bruce Lee imitator. Just make sure he has that 1-inch punch. Number 6. Jam from Guilty Gear. Jam has a cool detail in her backstory relating to Bruce Lee. She's constantly joining the fight to get funding for her restaurant after it fails or burns down or something that puts it in financial hardship, which seems to be an homage to Way of the Dragon, a movie where Lee's character was recruited to protect a struggling restaurant from bandits and money launderers. The main differences are, Jam's restaurant is of course facing different hardships, and she doesn't need to hire a bodyguard since she is the bodyguard. Some people say the restaurant angle is more just a martial arts movie trope in general, which I could believe, but I've always viewed it as a reference specifically to Way of the Dragon, mainly because a different Bruce Lee clone also has a similar restaurant backstory who may or may not appear higher on this list. Anyway, Jam has the power to control her ki, which she uses to, you guessed it, make her kicks fly, her strikes faster, and her punches 1 inch. She also shapes the ki in the form of a phoenix and of course a dragon, and I love the little touches on her idle pose. She shuffles her feet as a great reference to Lee's fighting stance. I always lament that Jam is not as popular in the fanbase from what I've heard. I think she's awesome, the high-flying chef who has a bit of an Ojo-sama laugh and is goofy, and now we know she's based on Bruce Lee. What's not to love? The character's the whole package. Team Jam for life. Number 5. Kim Dragon from World Heroes. What I like about Kim Dragon is he's just an actor. Most other Bruce Lee clones in fighting games fill the role of a character he would play in a movie, but Dragon is actually an actor, so he's pretty much just a legally distinct Bruce Lee with a few backstory details changed. And yes, I know there's another character like this, we'll get to him. And it makes sense, since World Heroes is a game that pulls famous figures from history to fight in one major tournament, so bringing one of the most famous martial arts actors into your tournament of famous warriors makes sense. All we really see from him in the lore is that he gets new movie gigs from the tournaments or recruits some of the other fighters for his films, but for the limited story of this series, it's pretty fun. His moveset is solid, giving you the rapid punches and kicks of a Bruce Lee clone with all the high-pitched noises mixed in. My favorite is when he does the light speed hits and the voice clip keeps cutting itself off to play itself again. World Heroes keeps some of the fighters grounded to an extent, usually with a major fantastical ability mixed in, with Kim Dragon's being the expected fire in the shape of a dragon for his big attacks. His flying kicks are super powered. He might be a bit obscure now with the whole series obscure, but World Heroes did have 4 games in its time, so at least he had a good run repping Bruce Lee. Number 4. John Talbane from Darkstalkers. Talbane has always been one of those characters with obvious Bruce Lee vibes in his moveset, but it goes under the radar since he has different aspects to his moveset too, and you know, he's a werewolf. From London, well played on that piece of lore by the way. Also, his human form has a very different appearance from Lee with that hair, but he does have the kung fu jacket of Lee that he removes when he transforms. That could just be a general kung fu warrior trope, but fans have convinced me of his Bruce Lee influence when you look at how he fights. Being a kung fu werewolf, he has flip kicks, claw slashes that work like punches, and he takes out some nunchaku for fast swings. Also, a dragon aura emerges. Once again, these could just be martial arts tropes, but the convincing factor for me are his howls. People have pointed out to me that they are similar to some of the Bruce Lee yells, just with a werewolf vibe to them, and whether or not that was the intent, I like the concept of that. Also, his taunts telling the opponent to come at him are very reminiscent of Bruce Lee to drive in the reference more. His backstory is independent of any Bruce Lee influence, being where he wants to defeat the inner demons that tried to convince him to go feral, and break the werewolf curse that got him shunned by society. I really like when he breaks the curse. The werewolf style is fun, but look how happy he is when he's a normal human, such a genuine smile. And of course, he still has some attacks free of any references to my knowledge, like the Beast Cannon, where he continuously charges forward. But for the most part, I'm willing to call Talbane one of the more offbeat Bruce Lee clones in fighting games. Number 3. Liu Kang from Mortal Kombat. Liu Kang has the distinction of being the only fighting game Bruce Lee clone to get main character status. He's the de facto protagonist of the series because no matter who comes along, it all goes back to the Kang. The first game made him a pretty straightforward clone, where he was shirtless wearing the traditional black pants, and all he could do was a flying kick and a fireball, also a cartwheel, and he did the high-pitched yells, which was mostly just him doing them as a reference, but it eventually became one of Liu Kang's signature features. It was Mortal Kombat 2 when he got his most famous move, the bicycle kick, where he just does the bicycle motion in midair while kicking repeatedly, and makes his most iconic sequence of noises. Really, the second game was an indicator of things to come for Liu Kang, since the first game was really the only time he was a pure Bruce Lee clone. Every game afterwards separated him more and more from Bruce Lee. In appearance, the outfit became more his own, at minimum having a few stripes on the pants and a headband, sometimes a shirt, and sometimes he was undead, or a god. Can't forget God Liu Kang. He also distanced himself from being the most grounded fighter almost immediately, with stuff like his dragon transformation and arcade cabinet summoning. However, as he lost a few Bruce Lee aspects, he gained them in other places. When weapons were introduced, he got the nunchaku, a Bruce Lee staple, and when alternate costumes became more plentiful, he got more direct Bruce Lee outfit references, like his Game of Death tracksuit. Then when fighting styles were labeled later on, of course they went with Jeet Kune Do or its alternate name Jun Fan for Liu Kang. And finally, Mortal Kombat 11 gave him a fatality that was a 1-inch punch, just with fire. It's very clear Liu Kang is his own character nowadays and has been basically since the beginning, but the developers make sure to still make note of Liu Kang's roots.
Liu Kang wins.
Number 2. Martial Law from Tekken. Law is one of the best Bruce Lee clones for how extensive Tekken move lists are. There are like 70 attack combinations, so he gets every reference in there. Pretty much take anything from the previous entries and it's here. Flying kick, 1-inch punch, rapid knuckle punches, the works. I always liked using his Dragon Fang, which is basically his 1-inch punch, being a punch with a long startup animation that's unblockable when fully charged, and it takes off like half the health bar of the opponent. My favorite attack though is one we haven't focused on too much on this list, the somersault. It's always been one of his best tools, being fast, good for combos, knocking the opponent away, and he had a double version when you wanted to do two. He also has a version where he falls during it for both mechanics reasons and for comic relief, which goes into another aspect of Law that sets him apart from other Bruce Lee clones. He's funny, sometimes to his detriment. While some of the other entries could have a comedic tone to them, most Bruce Lee clones are still treated seriously, even if they're laid back. Law, on the other hand, is a chef whose restaurant is always going under, and he has some wacky get-rich-quick scheme involving the tournament. Early on, it wasn't too goofy, where Law even got to open his own dojo, but by Tekken 5 and beyond, every plotline with him was full-on slapstick and treated him as a joke, and while I like slapstick, they took any modicum of seriousness out of his modern appearances. Like, his bits are funny, I don't want to see him go, I just wish he could get a win in the lore every so often. His seriousness though is still in his moveset. If you didn't know the story, you would think he's on par with every other Bruce Lee clone in terms of levity, and his outfits are always on point for a Bruce Lee clone. He even sports the mustache in some games that Bruce Lee had for some time. Marshall was so popular that he defied the time skip when they tried to replace part of the roster of older characters with their students or next of kin in Tekken 3. Julia replaced Michelle, Hwoarang replaced Pac, Jin replaced Kazuya. Pretty much all of the new characters became staples of future games, even if the older characters still returned later on, or they had successors that looked and sounded exactly like the original, like King 2 or Kuma 2. His son Forrest took his spot in Tekken 3, but after that game, Forrest got injured in Tekken 4, forcing his father to take his place again, and they just let him keep his roster spot for good, and Forrest was never seen again outside of the Tekken Tag Tournament spin-offs. I wonder what made Marshall so much more compelling than Forrest, since they were dead set on replacing everyone else that had a successor. Regardless, I'm happy to see Marshall in every Tekken, I just hope he can catch a break eventually.
You win.
I did not plan any honorable mentions, but I mainly wanted to shout out Rock Lee from Naruto, who is clearly heavily based on Bruce Lee. I've never played any of the Naruto fighting games outside of a demo of the GameCube one at an FYE in like 2005, so I can't really talk about any of them. But if you have any Naruto fighting game suggestions for future lists, let me know. Well, number 1 is probably obvious. It was a close race between this and a few other of the high-ranking entries, but as you might have narrowed down, it's number 1, Fei Long from Street Fighter. With Street Fighter 2 being so iconic, it gets the most love from Capcom, even when we'd like them to focus on other eras of the series. Those original 8 fighters and the 4 bosses make it into so much material, no matter how much we want other characters to get the spotlight. But if you like Street Fighter 2 aesthetic like I do, but don't want the overplayed stuff, look at Super Street Fighter 2 The New Challengers. It added 4 characters that don't get as much love, so you get the classic Street Fighter 2 vibe without them getting attention over and over again, with the exception of Cammy, who Capcom sorta pretends was there the whole time. Still love you, Cammy. Thanks for being my main for over 20 years. As for the other 3, we got DJ, T-Hawk, and the focus of this entry, Fei Long. Fei Long is a tried and true Bruce Lee clone in his moveset, appearance, backstory, name, and probably other factors. His backstory is exactly what I liked about Kim Dragon, where he's an actor in martial arts movies, only with Fei Long being in a more story-intensive game series, he is more fleshed out. The backstory is still pretty simple. He likes fighting, and the idea of a fight that isn't staged appeals to him, so he uses his years of Jeet Kune Do training to participate in whatever tournament is going on, though he can be brought back to the movie scene with the right price, and with everything he sees during the tournament, it inspires him for some of his movie ideas. Probably my favorite story thing about Fei Long isn't even in his arcade mode. He's Makoto's rival for her rival fight in Super Street Fighter 4, and she just sees him walking around in public and asks if he can spar with her to bring attention to her family's dojo. Fei Long is very happy to help, and it's such a wholesome moment. It makes you feel, oh cool, meet your heroes. As for his name, it's another reference to Lee's dragon nickname, with Fei Long meaning flying dragon, and his appearance is simple yet effective, going with Lee's black pants and sporting a similar hairstyle. Fei Long's alternate outfits are also Bruce Lee references. I'd say pick your favorite, but they gave him one of Lee's famous suits from the Green Hornet, and I don't think any other Bruce Lee clone references that, so that one's the best. Fei Long's stance with the active feet is also once again Bruce Lee-like, and that leads us to his moveset. It's pretty much a Street Fighter version of everything we've discussed. He's got flying kicks, 1-inch punches, those knuckle hits, also those flying spinning kicks upwards. He basically has everything in his moveset except the nunchaku, since he's only hand-to-hand combat, but he does still use them in one of his Street Fighter 2 win poses, and has them in his official art for Super Street Fighter 4, so we can keep on going with the references. His most iconic attack though is his Rekka-Ken. It's an attack that's just a punch forward, but you can chain it into 2 more punches forward by doing the input again as the first one is going off. The main reason this is so iconic is the name Rekka-Ken gets shortened to Rekka, and now it's just a universal fighting game term for moves with multiple parts that continue when you do the input again as the first part is being done. And that's pretty cool since Fei Long weirdly feels like the most forgotten of the new challengers today. Like in the following Street Fighter games, he's either a late inclusion or not included at all. Street Fighter 4 is the only game that brought him back before the other non-Cammy new challengers. Otherwise, he tends to come in late with the other new challengers, like in the console version of Street Fighter Alpha 3, missing out on all previous versions of the game, or not at all, like in Street Fighter 5. And that especially stings since in Street Fighter 6, the other 3 new challengers came back in some form. Cammy and DJ were there, and Lilyhawk, who's from the same tribe as T-Hawk, carried on his legacy, but nothing for the man who invented Rekka chains. I don't know, it feels like Fei Long should be more popular. Maybe I just have a bias for the new challengers more. Final note, he does all the high-pitched yells, can't forget to mention that. Also, his English voice was horribly lip-synced for his intro in Street Fighter 4. I know none of the English voices were properly synced in that game, but like, they didn't even try.
There is no way you could ever knock me out!
So, for being the fictional actor who was almost identical to the real actor, Fei Long is the top Bruce Lee clone in fighting games.
Come at me from whatever direction you like!
Now, what did you think? Did all these fighters honor Bruce Lee the best, or were there some that took inspiration from him that I forgot about? And who are some of your favorite Bruce Lee clones in gaming, whether I discussed them or not? Let me know in the comments. Anyway, thank you all for watching, and I will see you in the next video.